Welcome, welcome. All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to give it just a few moments as people join, but we are going to get rolling. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Excited to have you here. People are coming in fast and furious, which is awesome. All right. My colleague Mike is going to keep letting people in, and we are going to get rolling. My name is Emily Green. I'm NICA's VP of Development. I'm also a coach, entering my 6th year of coaching here in Madison, Wisconsin, and am so excited to help introduce this webinar. We are kicking off the second of a 4-webinar series presented in partnership with the Lifetime Foundation. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Hannah Otto, who, as you know, is a NICA alumna, a world champion cyclist, lifetime Grand Prix athlete, winner of the Leadville 100, and holder of the fastest known time on the Kokopelli Trail. We'll link the video for that later. Super rad, definitely worth a watch. Hannah is an incredibly accomplished athlete, but she also holds degrees in athletic training, exercise science, and that's all expertise that she puts to work in coaching and helping inspire other people to their own victories on and off the bike. So tonight, she's going to dive into the world of the off the bike training and the importance of strength training, mobility, and stretching. And she's going to reveal one of the most critical aspects to getting faster on the bike. I'm not going to share it, but I'll let her dive into that. And so there's going to be a poll, and would love to hear from you, like in the chat, who you are, where you're from, and what questions do you have for Hannah? So the poll just opened. And, ask questions related to tonight's topic if you can, because we're going to be monitoring the questions that you all submit. So if you have a question for Hannah related to off the bike training, strength training, any of that, enter it there, and then we will get to as many of those as we can after her presentation. Know that we won't be able to get to them all, but we'll do the best we can. So finally, and then coaches, respond to the poll and we'll provide you with continuing education credit for attending tonight. So finally, to the extent you can, please, if you're in a good space, keep your camera on if you can. It's so much easier when you're presenting to present to people rather than blank screens, and your mic off. We'll keep everyone muted except for Hannah. And I think with that, Hannah, I'm going to turn it right over to you so we can get this rolling. Thank you again for joining us.
Yay, thank you all so much for coming. Welcome to the new people. Thank you so much for coming back, to anyone who saw the first webinar. I know we do have a time limit today, and so I want to dive straight in to things here. Today we're talking about off the bike training, off the bike, everything off the bike that still helps to make you a better cyclist. This is something I'm super passionate about. In fact, as I was sort of preparing this presentation, I kept like having things and no, to take it out. Like there's just so much, a wealth of things in this topic that, gosh, we could talk forever. So I've narrowed it down. The main things we're going to be talking about tonight are mobility, stretching, strength, rest, and then balancing it all, because I know so many of you are not just cyclists. You're part of a family, you're part of a community, you're a student, you have so many other things going on. So how and where does cycling fit into that? So I will go ahead and just kick it off here. Let's see, I'll share my screen, share this. Okay. Perfect. So before I get going, Competitive Cyclist is an amazing partner of both myself and NICA. So they did share a discount code that is, if you want to write it down, I think it'll be dropped in the chat as well. It's 1Hannah20 for 20% off an eligible item. Feel free to use that to share it with others. It only benefits myself and NICA if you use that. So much appreciated, and hopefully it can get you a discount as well. Let go. How do I go to the next thing? Oh, got it. Okay. Okay. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about mobility and stretching, which are often confused, but actually very different things. So stretching helps with recovery and it helps prevent injuries. It's a very important part of training. I'm sure all of you have stretched before. Stretching helps with flexibility, which helps with the lengthening of muscles. And it does help prevent injuries. For me, my goal is simply to stretch for 10 minutes a day. It does not need to be fancy. I think this is where people can get confused, can get bent out of shape because there are so many different things. You don't need to stretch for an hour a day. If you can, great, but you don't need to. To me, that is overwhelming and it makes it so sometimes I do nothing. And so these small goals help me stay accountable. So my goal is to stretch for 10 minutes a day. I also foam roll. Foam rolling is a great way to also help to lengthen those muscles. Foam rolling is often done incorrectly. Foam rolling should be done by laying on the foam roller and targeting specific sections of your muscle. So a lot of people get on the foam roller and they glide back and forth like they're rolling out dough. You actually just want to move about 1 to 2 inches a second. So it's a very slow motion as you find trigger points within the muscles. And then when you find a somewhat painful or tender area, you stop there and you breathe and you let it release. But the big thing about stretching is stretching should be done after your workouts. And stretching, when I'm talking about stretching, I'm talking about static stretching. So you're holding one position for anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds, like a standard quad stretch. That's great for after your workouts to help promote recovery. You can do it as a group, maybe after practice when your coach is debriefing. You can do it in a circle up, have a nice time to chat. You can do it while you watch TV. These are all really great times to stretch. What you don't want to do is hold a stretch right before you start racing on the start line, when you wake up in the morning. This type of static stretching has actually been shown to decrease performance in the type of sport that we do when done right before exercise. So leave the stretching for after. But what you've probably seen athletes do before exercise is mobility. And mobility is the body's ability to move through a complete range of motion. And so when we're working on mobility, we're working on making sure that our joints can do the entire spectrum of what they are made to do. Most of us have limitations in this area, which means most of us all can benefit from some type of mobility. You've probably also heard the term dynamic stretching or stretching with movement. That is also a type of mobility. Um, and so, what I do, just like with stretching, I like to keep my mobility simple and short so that I actually stay accountable to it. So I've created a routine that's about 5 minutes, and I do that 5 minute mobility routine before every workout. And this, now looking at the slides, is sort of how I've decided what is really important within a cyclist's mobility routine. So as a cyclist, we only move in the sagittal plane, which the sagittal plane is forward and backwards. So when we ride, we are constantly moving forward. This is different than a sport like basketball, where they move in the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, side to side. They're using all the different muscles because they're moving all the different directions. Since we only move forward, we have to spend extra time to work the muscles that allow you to move side to side. So one of those muscles is the glute medius. Those are the basically hip muscles. Another muscle that you want to target you want to target the glutes. You want to target the core. You want to target the hip flexors, and we're kind of get into a little bit of all of the reasons why for these. So first of all, the first one, the hips, like I mentioned, the glute means is really important because a lot of knee pain actually originates from the hip. Because when our hip muscles are weak, our knees, if you've ever been riding and your knees are coming in towards the frame or hitting the frame, that's from a weakness of those glute meats that aren't able to hold your legs out far enough. And when our legs are moving in towards the frame, it means that we're putting a lot of tension on a lot of different muscles that don't need that tension. And so by strengthening up those hip muscles or by activating them before we get on the bike, we can help prevent some of these aches and pains. So some of the exercises that I do for that is glute bridges, which you can see over here on the bottom, fire hydrants, which you can see on the top. There's also clamshells. You've maybe heard of monster walks with bands or ladder walks with bands. Those are all glute med exercises. And then I'm sure you've heard everyone talk about core. Core is very important to obviously drive power, but it's also really important as a way to prevent injury. So the core is actually one of the most important things to help support our back. If you think of the muscles of the core, you can almost think of when you brace or when you use the muscles of the core, they expand and they create stability for that back muscles. Without that core bracing, the back can kind of be loosey-goosey. And so that's one of the reasons why the core really helps to support the back and can prevent back pain. Back pain is also common in cyclists because we spend so much time leaning over. Honestly, our position on the bike is a lot like someone working on a computer. It's quite poor posture, really. And so we have to correct it. We need to spend time off the bike opening our back up, creating mobility in the opposite direction. And so again, before workouts, I spend time focusing on my core and focusing on pulling my all the back muscles, engaging them and stretching out those muscles on the front of my body. Additionally, the hip flexors are another thing that can cause a lot of back pain. Since we are leaning over a lot of the time on the bike, that posture, it shortens the hip flexors. Since our legs are up and our body is forward, the hip flexor becomes very short. And that can actually, the hip flexor attaches to the pelvis and can rotate the pelvis forward, again, causing stress on the back. So back pain is generally due to core instability or hip flexor tightness. So some of the things I do before my workouts would be right here. You can see wall angels. So wall angels, you go all the way up against the wall like you see there. You put your arms against the wall. You move them all the way up to the top, touch above your head, and then your elbows all the way back down to your sides while keeping your entire arm flush against the wall the whole time. Some other of my favorites are open thoracic book, which you can see here, helps with that thoracic or that mid back, bird dogs, and dead bugs, which are exercises that are especially important. They help with the transverse abdominis muscle, which is one of the key muscles in supporting the back. So in addition to these smaller kind of ancillary exercises that you can do every single day before you get on the bike, if you have the time and the ability, strength training can also be extremely important for a cyclist. And I think this is an interesting topic for high school athletes because I know that many of you are strapped for time. And so it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. You just want to think about the main principles here that I'm going to present. So strength training, like y'all know, can make you a stronger cyclist. Okay, great. What else can it do? It can help promote bone density. Since cycling is not a weight-bearing sport like running is, Wolf's Law is that bones respond to forces placed upon them, which means when we put weight on our bones get stronger. And so, since we're not putting weight on our bones on the bike, we have to put weight on our bones in other ways to make them stronger. Strength training is a great way to do that. Strength training also helps to promote tendon strength. It also helps to promote ligament strength. And overall, that helps to prevent injury. And so, some things you want to think about specifically as a cyclist when you do strength training is cycling is actually a unilateral sport, meaning we produce power through one leg at a time. And so, when the gym, if you can ever mimic that by producing power or strength through one leg at a time, it's going to be extremely cycling specific. Also on the bike, we are constantly balancing, even though you probably hardly even realize it anymore because you're so used to riding. You are constantly engaging your core in a way that keeps you upright. So if you can include balance in your strength training, that's another great one. A lot of you have probably seen people on Swiss balls and Bosu balls and all these crazy balance exercises. If you want to do it, there's nothing wrong with that. But also, balance is as simple as standing on one foot. It doesn't have to be super complicated in order to be effective. Multi-joint exercises is another really great one. When we ride, we move our knees and our hips. And so we are using multiple joints while we are riding, which means if we can mimic that in the gym, that's also very helpful. So exercises like a squat is going to, again, work at the hips and the knees. And then concentric and eccentric exercises. So that's going to be like in a squat, when you go down, that's going to be eccentric. And when you come up, that's going to be concentric. So just making sure that you're working all like both up and down of a push-up and not just, doing half of the exercise. So some exercises just to go through that would be really great for all of the things I just mentioned. Squats, any jumping exercises are really going to help with explosive movements on the bike. They're going to be super great for that bone density and tendon strengthening, like I mentioned. Single leg RDLs is one of my favorites, which is why I included that photo there. Lunges, you often don't think of that one, but that does include balance and is actually single leg. And then same thing, bench step ups, that is single leg as well. So that is a lot of the nitty gritty on some of those detailed exercises that I wanted to share. But I think that is kind of just the tipping point, right? Like I can share these things all that we want, but the bottom line is it takes time to do these things. And one of the most important aspects of training is actually finding places to rest because we can only train as hard as we can rest. And so you need to remember when you're considering adding these things in, a lot of you, I'm sure, want to be the best that you can be. And so you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, I need to add strength training. Well, if you have the time, because if you add in these things and it comes at the expense of sleep, of having time to eat full meals that will fuel you, if it comes at the expense of doing your homework or things that give you fulfillment, like spending time with family, it's not ultimately going to make you faster. And so you need to remember that if you add strength training and add that strain on your body, you also need to add extra rest. And so these things don't occur in a vacuum, they all occur together. And so it's really important as you add these things in to remember that with the body, stress is stress. The body doesn't always view stress as, well, this is my mental stress, and this is my physical stress, and this is my emotional stress. The body just sees this huge basket of stress that it is taking on. So, some ways that we can help reduce physical stress and mental stress and emotional stress is taking off days on the bike. It's really important, excuse me, it's really important to take your days off. If your coaches are telling you take an off day, take the off day. You need to trust them. I also take off days. Off days are not something that you graduate from. They actually become more and more important as you work harder and harder. You also want to make sure that you're taking recovery weeks. One off day is often not enough. You need to take time to fully recover, which sometimes takes longer. So, a recovery week for me, for most training cycles, is going to look like about 50 to 60% of what you normally do on a hard week. So, almost half of what you're normally doing is what is considered good and adequate rest. I bet a lot of you are not taking that much. You also need to take time off every year. You need to take a couple weeks off every year or more if you feel like you need it. It's important because stress compounds on itself. And so you might feel okay in December, but you don't feel okay 6 months from then. And then 6 months from then, we have to take these dedicated times to rest and recover in order to build back even stronger. And then I'm going to add as well to the physical, to the recovery aspect is fueling the work. If you feel like, well, gosh, I am training so hard, I'm recovering so hard, and I still feel exhausted in my workouts, I would challenge you to look to see if you are fueling enough. The brain uses about 20% of your glycogen stores on its own. That is so much. And so when you're at school, when you're thinking, when you're out with friends, these are all times that it really helps you appreciate how much mental stress we're under as well. When we know that the fuel that we're putting in our body, 20% of it alone is just going to our brain. That really helps you appreciate how much more you probably need to fuel those really hard workouts as well. It's really important, I think, to remember that mental fatigue does contribute to a decline in physical performance. And so I think this is a place where it's a balance of trying to minimize your mental fatigue. So an example of that could be if it's race day, it would be a good idea, if possible, to save really strenuous mental tasks for after the race. That would be beneficial to your performance. On the other hand, with practice, you might have had to go through a whole school day, and that's a lot of mental fatigue, and that's okay. And the important thing in that aspect is to understand that and to grant yourself grace for the fact that if you've had a really strenuous day at school, that actually will impact your training, and that's okay. Be aware of it and make sure that you're taking the rest after that you need as well. And sometimes that means creating time to mentally rest. If you don't have the time to rest, then you need to pull back on your training. And if you don't, eventually your body will make you. And so if you're finding that you're burning the candle at all ends, and you're training and you're doing homework and school and this and that and the other, and you're never resting, that might mean, okay, I need to back off my training. I can't quite handle this load. And I need to, instead of doing this 2 hour ride or whatever it might be, I'm going to cut it in half so that I can spend 1 hour to rest. That's totally fine and will ultimately benefit you. One of the things that I think that I've instituted, especially when I was in school as well, is sort of this 5 minute break rule as I transition from task to task. So it can be really benefit for you and your training and your body to simply take, if you're transitioning from school to the bike, from a conversation with a friend to the bike, whatever it might be, from one thing to the next, just take 5 minutes to close your eyes and to breathe. It sounds somewhat silly, but it really helps to recenter yourself on the task at hand. And then finally, I feel like I have to say it, so I'm just going to kind of throw it out there, is obviously sleep. And I say it like that because, look, we all know, I don't feel like I need to drill this into you. I'm not saying it because it's not important, but I'm saying you all have heard you need 8 hours of sleep. Just do it. Okay. um, and then I just wanted to sort of touch on the concept of balancing it all, because this is something that was certainly prevalent in my life. You know, I now have the joy of racing full time, but it hasn't always been that way. I was also a busy high school student. I double majored in college. There were many of days in college where the only time I had to ride was at 5 a.m. before class. So I get what it's like to be very busy. Um, but it's important that you do find balance within that all. And so one of the things that I think is really important is that you make sure that you're not carrying the weight of one task into another task. Be fully present with what you're doing while you are doing it. If you have committed to being at practice, be at practice. If you're committed to being in the classroom, be in the classroom. If you're thinking about one while you're doing the other, the only thing it's doing is diminishing your ability to perform at that task. You're not going to find achievement one place while you are at the other. So just get rid of that weight and focus on it when it counts. Another way that can be really helpful to balance it all is simply communication. I feel like in my career, this is the thing that has made everything possible, is the ability to communicate with your coach and with your peers and with your authorities, be it teachers or whomever, what you are balancing. Most of the time, people are understanding. So tell your coach, hey, I just so you know, I have a really big school project due in 1 month. And during this week, that's going to be the top of my priorities. They will be understanding. But it's difficult as the coach to know that without you telling them. So don't be afraid to communicate the obligations and responsibilities that you have. And with that, it's okay and even important to schedule your training around those responsibilities. Just like I said, the body can't distinguish the types of stress you're encountering. Uh, it means that if it's been a stressful day on the emotional side with family, don't make it an extra hard training day. Take it an easier day and make sure that stress doesn't go from one place to the next. That's completely fine. And with that, make sure that you're planning ahead. So if you know that something's going to be stressful, that means, hey, maybe we make that the recovery week so that you aren't totally strung out. And throughout all of this, it's really important to remember to keep it fun. Like this all sounds so complicated, but really at the end of the day, we're all on the bike to have fun. So it's important to remember that just like we talked about in the first webinar, you won't always feel like getting on the bike, but you might feel like going towards those goals. And that can help you remain motivated. Sometimes motivation follows action, which means that sometimes we need to get moving in order to feel that motivation. You might finish a long day at school and think, oh my gosh, I don't want to get on the bike. But once you're on the bike and you're spinning for 5 minutes, you're remembering, oh yeah, this is fun. I do want to do this. And so just a lot of the time, I feel like the best commitment you can make to yourself is committing to starting. Just start the workout. Because most of the time, more often than not, if you start, you will find the rhythm and feel good. And if you don't, that's an even better sign that, okay, I do need a rest day today. And you can always stop. So for me, one of my rules for myself is I always commit to the warm up. Go through the warm up and then make your decision because most of the time, once you're out there riding, things start falling into place. Because I think most of us would agree that cycling is often an outlet in our life. It's meant to be fun, it's meant to give us freedom. And so it's really important that even within all of these technical details that we've discussed today, it's important to schedule rides also that are just about fun, that are just about feeling the joy of riding the bike. The bike is my job, and I do that too. I go out just because I love it. And I think it's important sometimes to schedule time in our very busy lives to do that and to remember to play on your bikes because ultimately, when we're out there and we're riding and we're racing, this is our game. Just like soccer is a game or football is a game, the bike is a game, and we get to go out and we get to play. And so remember that when you're at practice or doing your workouts, this is play, this is fun, and embrace that and let that motivate you and let that drive you. Questions? I feel
Hannah,
like that was a lot of information.
I would say keep throwing them in the chat as well. We've got some good ones that came into the poll, so a lot of you kind of may have come in later, but if other questions have been sparked. I'm Mike McGarry. I'm the director of coaching and education for NICA, and I'm going to throw a couple questions at you, Hannah. So I think one of the first ones that kind of came up early was how often do you kind of do strength training? And kind of the follow-up is kind of now that it's your job versus when you were a high school athlete.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think the answer is quite similar. So, we're cyclists first. The bike is our most important priority. And just like I said, you can only train as hard as you can rest. That means that if you add on a ton of strength training, it's going to impact your cycling. And we don't want that to happen. And so for me, strength training twice a week has been pretty much my staple for most of my career. It's not so much that it overloads you, but it's just enough to make improvements. And I think the biggest thing for me, though, that has changed from high school to now is what that time looks like. In high school, it might have just been 15 to 20 minutes of core exercise. Now that this is my job and I have a lot more time, I can go to a gym and do these big lifts that take more like an hour. But even 15 to 20 minutes is great. You can do it in the morning before school. That's an excellent way to get it in. One other thing that I will add too, that's just kind of a extra info on this is I think a lot of time we think that strength training needs to look a certain way or look really fancy. But when we strength train, if you've never done it before, the first 12 weeks of strength training, most of the gains you're making are neuromuscular gains. And so most of the gains that you're making is actually your brain learning how to talk to your muscle. And because that communication gets stronger, you're able to lift more weight and get stronger through that capacity. So that means even if you can't go to the gym, even if you're not lifting big amounts, you can get stronger simply by going through the motions and your brain learning how to better communicate with your muscles. I just think that's super amazing and really encouraging for those of us that don't have a ton of access or time.
Awesome. I'm going to come back to some strength training questions, but I think one that came up in here too is kind of the recovery week, and I think like that's sometimes tough for all athletes, and I even see in here like sometimes um, the cycling or the physical activity can be the de-stress. So how do you manage kind of the mental side of a rest and recovery to be like, I know I need this, and sometimes that can be more stressful. I think sometimes to know that you need it and not feel like you're missing out on something, that FOMO of a rest week.
Oh man. Like let me tell you, I have all the answers, but I am human too. So I guess I'll start with like, I am also struggle with the rest weeks. It's okay. We all want to ride our bikes. We all want to be with friends. We all want to do all these great things. And we all also suffer from society today, which is like the more mentality. So if you're experiencing these emotions, you are not alone. It's fine. What I have found to be most beneficial, though, to help with this is to replace what I would typically do in training with other restful activities. Asterisk, other restful activities. So a lot of the time when I say that, people are like, oh, I will save my school project for that week, or oh, I can catch up on all of this. That's not what this is. Stress is stress and stress and stress, like we just learned. This is if you train for an hour and a half every day, typically, and now we're cutting that in half. And so you're just doing 45-minute rides during your recovery week. Now we have 45 more minutes every day where we can stretch, we can read a book, we can watch TV, we can enjoy making a really wonderful meal that nourishes us. We can take a bath, like you name it. Pick something that fulfills you and makes you feel good and add that into your schedule.
Thank
Usually
you.
I get my nails done on recovery weeks. Just for all the girls out there.
Here's what that came from the chat, and this one was if doing intervals or hard rides is the mental de-stressor, is it okay to kind of put some of that, physical stress on the body to relieve some of the mental stress? Any correlation there?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think yes and no. I think sometimes that physical stress can be an outlet. And so sometimes it does, like maybe you've had a really frustrating day and you go out and you just hammer on the pedals. I think every now and then that's fine. But intervals are a little bit different story because when we're fulfilling intervals and we're fulfilling a really structured workout, I think there's a level of stress that comes with that in terms of trying to make everything a certain which way, that doesn't really allow your mind to just go blank. And so if you're going out and you're just pushing on the pedals hard and you're like not thinking about anything, I think that can be a mental de-stressor. But if you're going out and you're pushing really hard on the pedals and you're trying to hit times or heart rates or power or RP or whatever you train by, that is a different type of mental stress as well.
So then, like, I think using, like, I'm just trying to put it into a phrase that I can go to with this, Hannah. So, like, not feeling like you have to hit your marks on those really high stress days. So it
Yes.
doesn't add even more stress when you're like, why can't I hit the power numbers or the RPE that I think I should be hitting?
Or
Because
the time, like going out and timing yourself on your favorite loop, even if it's fun, that still adds stress. Because you're like trying to hit a certain goal. But if you're just like, I'm just gonna go ride and I'm gonna ride hard and I'm gonna ride fast and I'm not gonna look or worry about anything, that's different.
great. We've got a couple, I think, in the poll and in the chat around kind of weight, adding weight to the strength training here. So kind of one of the ones from our poll was when do you think young cyclists are ready for weight training, to adding weights? And then the follow-up would be, what should weight training look like for young cyclists?
Yeah, I think so. Depending on who you ask about this, you're going to get a lot of different answers. Um, I think that you know, I think high school is like, if you're before high school, I think probably stick to a lot of core based and body weight based exercises. Once you get into high school, if you want to start adding some weights to your strength training, I think that's great. The biggest caution though that I would make is once you start adding weight, there's a form element that becomes really important. And so if you're not familiar with the weight room, stick to core, stick to body weight. You know, form is still important for those, but the level of damage that can occur due to improper form is minimal compared to if you're lifting really heavy things. So if you are wanting to include weights, like physical heavy objects to your strength training, my recommendation would be to seek out somebody at your school who can teach you that. A lot of high schools have weight training classes. A lot of high schools have athletic trainers, or even a coach. Maybe your cycling coach can as well if they have access to the gym at your school. But most of the coaches within your high school, I'm sure, would also be very happy to take you and your team through a strength training lesson. And that form is really important for taking that next step.
Great. And then to kind of stay on the strength training space, there are some questions on lifting heavy, so lower reps, or lifting
Mhm.
lighter with more reps. And again, thinking specifically for cyclists.
Yeah. So, ooh, um, again, the lower reps you go, the more important it is to have proper form. So again, that's going to depend on your comfortability in the gym. Personally, I go through a periodized weight training program. So personally, what I do is I will go through a hypertrophy, strength, power, and endurance phase. And each of these phases are typically 4 to 6 weeks. And what that looks like is hypertrophy is going to be about 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps. Strength is going to be 3 to 4 sets of like 6 reps. Power, you're looking at 5 sets of about 3 reps. And then endurance, you're looking at 20 plus reps. And for all of those different phases, you're going to want to have about 1 to 2 reps in reserve, meaning that when you finish that set of 10 squats, it was hard, but if you had to do 2 more, you could. I think as a cyclist, we don't need to be maxing out because there's never a time that we are really like we're never lifting 500 pounds in a pedal stroke, right? Like what we're trying to do is produce larger power, not necessarily like these massive, massive lifts. And so reps in reserve also helps us maintain our ability to continue to train on the bike as well and not become so incredibly sore that like forget the workout for the next 3 days.
And this is, I don't know if this came up in the chat, but I know you hit on it specifically when you talked about strength training. If any of us, as either coaches or athletes, are going in and working with a strength training person, I think it's important for them to like let them know we're training for cycling, right? So they get those single leg things. Because again, squats are awesome, right? But we're not usually using 2 legs at the same time or ever on a bike.
Exactly. The best strength training for cyclists is going to be some sort of functional strength training. So all the things I mentioned, as well as if there's movement, like large movements involved, it's usually good. Like a great exercise that I'll add for cyclists as well is Turkish get-ups, because you can see how you can Google it if you've never seen it, but it's like a very dynamic movement that requires a lot of balance and coordination. And balance and coordination are things that our sport is very heavy in.
Just writing it down in my notes. super secret about Coach Mike. He doesn't love Turkish get-ups, but he always does them when they show up on the list. Always does them.
This is the thing. Does anybody like Turkish get-ups? Like, raise your hand if you like them, because those things are the worst. But I always advocate for them.
I do them when they show up on the list, but I kind of like burpees. Okay.
Exactly.
This leads nicely into this next question we got from a coach. Advice for coaches to help make mobility training, strength training, and stretching fun and a part of their routine.
Well, I think stretching is the easiest one to make fun because it's like after all the hard work. And so for me, stretching is where community is often formed. Stretching is a time where we're all having fun. It should be a really enjoyable time of your day. Like when I stretch, I'm always adding something in that I enjoy that signals to my brain, hey, I'm done. Hey, this is fun. Whether it's me watching TV, whether it's me um, listening to some nice music. Sometimes I'll call a friend. Like stretching is the joy. Mobility, I think the thing with mobility is, in my opinion, it should be very short. I think you'll see a lot of athletes go through these big, elaborate mobility plans. It's too much. Like, keep it 5 max 10 minutes, and that is what will be sustainable. And that's a time that you're spending. Usually, when I'm doing mobility, I'm thinking through the workout and visualizing. I'm hyping myself up. I'm getting excited. So, in a team atmosphere, that could be a time where while you're doing mobility, the coach could be explaining the workout, telling you that you're ready, explaining what the focus areas are, explaining why this workout is gonna, help you crush your goals. Like, this should be a pump up time. And then I think strength training, for me, strength training is really fun because it is just something so different. And it's a place for me personally where I have a lot of curiosity. And by that, I mean on the bike, since that is what we all do. I think we have some really hard and fast goals that we're always pushing towards. I think the gym is a place that helps facilitate those goals, which means there's a lot more flexibility in the gym to have fun, to see what works, to see what clicks, to see what you enjoy. And so I think the gym should be a place where what's fun is constantly mixing it up to surprise your muscles, to see, oh, does this make me sore? Does this make me sore? Am I good at this? Am I good at that? Do I enjoy this? Do I enjoy that? Like, let the gym also be a place of exploration for learning what your body can do and what it's capable of.
I think for coaches, just too, it can be a nice way. It's the strength training piece for us to spice it up. Sometimes, it can a little bit. I love riding my bike, but it can get monotonous after a while if it's the same loops, the same places, kind of over and over again. And they're a great rain day activity, right? If you have access to them, and can't have it because of rain. So,
and if you're not going to the gym and you're just doing core, you can make it a group activity as well. Like in high school, one of my favorite practices was we would all do core and every person on the team would pick one exercise. And it was really fun to go around the circle and to see what each person would pick to share with the group.
Awesome. You mentioned, again, kind of fueling as part of the balance here. So we had a question coming up about, like, how are you making sure that you're fueling properly? The question specifically said races, but I would like to kind of expand. How are you making sure that you're fueling properly, post-workout and pre-race?
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, fueling is going to look different for everybody. Um, everybody and everybody. But I think what's really important, especially in this context of recovery, and stress and adding in extra things, is really that you are fueling enough. Because if you're not fueling enough, that's where things like injuries happen. That's where grumpiness happens. That's where unsustainability happens. And sometimes just that's where mysterious fatigue can happen. Like, there are times where I'll go out and I'm like, I should be able to do this workout. What's going on? Oh, shoot. Like, yeah, I didn't eat enough yesterday. Like I'm in a caloric deficit. And so you want to make sure that, I mean, this could be a whole nother topic, but I think, the really key elements in regards to this is that you are fueling before, during, and after your exercise. So we won't even get into what your 3 meals look like, but I think just as a general rule of thumb, let's eat something before we get on the bike to help top off our fuel stores. Could be anything from a pancake to a gel. Like eat something right before you get on the bike, then eat throughout your ride. Depending on how long your ride will depend how much you eat. But no matter how long your ride is, you should be eating at least something every hour. Even if your ride's only 1 hour, you should still be eating something during that 1 hour. And then you should be eating something within 30 minutes of finishing. Um, Protein is obviously very important, but a lot of what we burn on the bike is glycogen or carbohydrate. And so while we do focus on protein, I feel like sometimes that gets almost too much of a spotlight. And when we get off the bike, really, we need something rich in carbs. Like we need a big carbohydrate, um, like whammy when we get off the bike to help build up those stores. And then after we get those carbs in, that's when we really focus on that protein to help rebuild the muscle.
Awesome. Another one came into the chat here. This one specifically was like, how, again, what would you say to younger girls that want to get out there but are struggling with motivation for themselves, or to get out on the bike and just stay motivated then too? So this one, a little bit about that motivation piece there.
Yeah, I'm curious if the struggling of motivation, just because it was specifically towards younger girls, if that's also like coming from a lack of confidence, which I would say to me, and this is a lot of what we talked about in the first one, but to me, so much of motivation comes from goals, and driving towards those goals. And what I love about this sport is that goals can be so individual to you. And so I think the harder that you find motivation, the closer you bring your goals. So like in the last one, we talked about short-term and long-term goals. If you have really big goals that are too far away, it's easy for that motivation to slip. But if you have goals for today, for tomorrow, for this weekend, I think those goals in close proximity that you can almost touch, those are the goals that often drive me day to day today.
All right, Hannah, I think we're coming close to the end. Thank you so much. And thank you to those that we didn't get to your question. There was a lot of them. We can kind of continue to share them and make sure that other sessions go in there. Olivia is going to keep throwing some of those links to register for our upcoming sessions, to make sure that we've got that discount code to get that Coco Pelli Strong video. Hannah, anything else to like kind of close us out with tonight on, that balance, that off the bike, that strength training, that mobility?
Yeah, I would say just have fun with it. We talked about a lot of things, a lot of big, complicated topics that we could probably host a whole series just on this. So I really honed in on just the really important principles of the topics. And I would say, based on those principles, just go and have fun with it. A little something is always better than nothing. So if you've never stretched before, stretch for 5 minutes. If you've never done mobility, try one exercise. Just see what it does and just continue to approach your training with curiosity and see where that takes you.
Thanks so much, Hannah. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us tonight. Hooray.
Thank you all. We'll see you for the next one. The next one, I believe, is the why behind your workout. So I'll be diving more into what it means, why we do aerobic rides, why we do hard intervals, why we do VO2 intervals, to help you gain a little bit more clarity on why we are doing all these different types of training.
Thanks
all. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Great night.
Good night.